Every belief is a psychological suppression. This means that as long as you believe something, you actually don't have direct access to reality. You're actually suppressing what reality is like, and you're overimposing this reality with a belief. You will notice this when you talk to somebody who doesn't hold as many beliefs. You'll see that they are actually quite not just agreeable, but they can argue with certainty. And this might appear as very pretentious or arrogant or confident in their positions. But usually people who don't hold many beliefs are much happier because they are not so trapped by them. Beliefs trap you into a psychological framework, and they force all of your emotions and your relationship to life to conform to this psychological framework. So in the best case scenario, you only know things and you don't have any beliefs. But this brings us into a philosophical argument about epistemology. Can you truly know a thing? And what does it really mean to believe something? This is what this video is going to be about. In Buddhism, there's a concept called conceptual proliferation, which is their way of saying that when you believe in a concept, like let's say a round earth, well, now this concept changes what the word earth means to you. So now what you don't really interact with is the earth itself or what it means to be on this planet. It's now a concept, which is of course very useful, right? Because now we can actually talk about the thing. If we don't define words and if we don't use concepts, well, then how are we supposed to communicate, right? I could just turn off the video and that's about that, folks. So these concepts are useful. It's not that they don't try to map on or try to point to truth, but they're not truth itself, right? We can agree that if we say planet Earth, it is very different to think about it than to see it on a map or to look at it directly on your feet or to just feel the gravity on the ground. So now somebody comes to you and they say, you know what? The Earth is actually not round. It is flat. Okay? We were like this a few 100 years ago. Do we have to go back to this, this way of thinking? Well, it seems like it, because now a ton of people are convinced that the Earth is actually flat. Why does anybody believe this? Right? So it is actually a suppression mechanism. It has nothing to do with if the Earth is actually round or flat, but they have feelings surrounding the concept of a round Earth that is negative. Maybe feelings of distrust towards the government or distrust towards family members that have told them that the Earth is actually round, or some other crazy conspiracy theory. Now, with this idea in mind, they have found also a community that agrees with them. You know what? The world is actually flat. You don't need to believe all of these round Earth people. But what is this actually about? It has nothing to do with truth. It is only about keeping the emotions and the feelings away, like suppressing them psychologically, so they don't have to confront themselves with the awful reality of a round Earth. But it's weird, right? Like, why would they care about if the Earth is round or not? Why is there emotional pain behind that? And here the reasons might be different for each person, but oftentimes it seems to be related to a trust issue. And then around this trust issue in identity builds. I cannot trust this person, and I'm so smart because I realized I cannot trust this person. And now you actually prop yourself up as an intelligent guy because you saw through the illusion while actually just deluding yourself even further. But now you've deluded yourself so much and you've suppressed so much of this emotion that if you were to come in direct contact with the truth of the round Earth, you might go actually insane. You might go depressed and very disconnected from life. The contact with reality is painful. And what we humans do is we create all of these belief systems to avoid the contact with direct reality. And you might say, but the Earth is round. There's nothing painful about that, right? And I don't believe the Earth is round. I know the Earth is round. Well, there are a lot of arguments to be made here that you actually don't know the Earth is round. You also just believe it, like the flat earther does. And if I try to convince you that the Earth is actually flat, you'll notice that you will have a lot of emotional resistances towards this belief, because you actually don't know that the earth is round in some absolute sense, right? If you take the philosophy or like epistemology seriously, likely you haven't tested it for yourself. That's why we usually trust people with authority that have certain methods developed with which they can determine if the earth is flat or round. And then maybe you investigate how these methods function and how we can be so sure about that, and how are there so many different methods that all work together to make that the earth is round, right? So that we know that the earth is round in all sense and purposes. But you can see now that even the term knowing gets kind of wishy-washy. There's some sense of reasonable knowing, which you might also call like material knowledge. And in this framework, well, of course, yeah, the earth is round, we know that. But if you take some epistemological higher standard, then we could say, do we really know anything? Is not everything kind of just like a psychological suppression mechanism with which we try to kind of conform to the norms of the world? A huge part in this psychological play here is confirmation bias, which basically means that if you already have a belief and a new idea comes to you that conforms to this belief, then you are just way more likely to believe in it. And confirmation bias is so common that it kind of permeates into everything you do. And here the same mechanism works. And don't think you're way smarter than the flat earther, because the same happens to you. If I'm going to tell you a new scientific discovery, like the idea that reality is made out of consciousness, and you don't believe in this, or you don't have some confirmation bias towards this idea, you're going to be very skeptical. And you're not just going to be skeptical in a conceptual way. If you're aware of yourself, you notice it's making you feel uncomfortable. It's challenging the way you relate to reality and the world. And that's because belief systems create perceptual filters that literally prevent us from seeing contradictory information. Developmental psychology shows us that the earlier you start to believe in something, you build a ton of protective barriers towards protecting this belief. So the reason we do this is to protect ourselves from overwhelming or negative experiences. From a very reasonable standpoint, imagine how much sensory input comes to your brain or comes to your mind. If your mind believes everything is a threat or everything is of huge importance, well, then you are maybe going to be amazed, like on a psychedelic trip, right? You just look at this microphone. Isn't it incredible that this microphone works? But then I'll get distracted by the microphone instead of communicating with you. So to have like compartmentalized what this microphone is in my brain and to understand what it means in this context instead of freaking out by the technological complexity is already a protective barrier. And although it might seem just very cold and rational, it is also emotional in nature, because if you get too overwhelmed by sensory data that your brain can't handle, well, then you're going to go crazy too. So it's actually beneficial to make belief systems out of simple things and then to compartmentalize them. And you might say, what is there to believe about what the microphone is? It's very obvious, right? But what is really obvious about that? There's the only thing that's obvious about what a microphone is when you use it and you experience it and how it's functioning right now. But the concept of a microphone is a very odd thing, and it is not easy to clearly define it. And there's so many different types of microphones and so many, there's so much to think about and considerate. Okay, I might also be nerding out a little bit here, but so what the brain does is that it tries to predict what comes next. All the time the brain tries to predict, it tries to predict what sensory experience is next. I repeated myself. So if somebody comes suddenly into my room from this door and my mental model right now did not expect that, well, then I'd be shocked, right? I'd be surprised, and I have some physical or emotional reaction towards somebody suddenly entering my room without knocking, which I find very disrespectful. And if I were to believe, oh, it's actually quite likely that somebody might enter my room in the next 5 minutes because I heard someone entering my house, well, then I wouldn't be so surprised. Okay, that's very obvious, Klecko. What is your point? So it shows that before the actual experience happens, my belief systems about the situation actually determine how I react to it. The fact that I don't expect something makes it either worse or better. Like, the expectation is a huge aspect of how we relate to things. Expectation is also the root of all suffering, because you expect life to be different than how it actually is. The moment you start to chip away at how many things you kind of want to be different and want to like change, and that are just uncomfortable in your experience, just physically, where you're like, there's like this low grade of suffering that you want to get rid of. Well, you can investigate that, and often you'll see that there are beliefs that will come up even in the slightest sensations. Even if you burn yourself, it's my classical pain example because it's just so visceral. If you burn your finger while you were cooking something, right? And now you have this burned finger that hurts and aches, and it's just a horrible type of pain. There might be a belief that comes up that says, why I'm still here? Why do I have to be here? Just to suffer? Implying that life should be without suffering. Implying that burning shouldn't hurt. Which is quite delusional. It doesn't make sense. But somewhere in the psychology, the mind resisted the idea of this type of pain. And now there's like this underlying belief that is unconscious that tells you should not feel pain. Pain is not something that should happen. Which there are like layers to it, right? Because if you don't feel any pain, you actually die. There are people that have this genetic conditions that they cannot experience pain, and they usually have very short lifespans because, it's a horrible condition to not experience pain. You don't know when your body needs something. So you become very smart and powerful when you start to be able to manipulate and influence what your brain or body or mind expects. And the way you do this is by actually investigating where your belief systems lie. And the only way you can do that intelligently is if on a fundamental epistemological level, when I say epistemology, it's just the nature of knowledge or the nature of being. On this ground level, what you'll see is that all beliefs are basically just psychological suppression mechanisms. So it's not that no belief is true, but no belief is the same as truth. Because truth is direct interfacing with experience. It's direct contact. Like right now, I'm speaking through a microphone, and in this interaction, it is revealed what a microphone is, but not as some concept. And when you can see that all beliefs operate from this level, then you start to not get so attached to whatever you believe. And how you could have guessed, all these problems of psychological suppression are just about attachment. They're about an identity. The flat earther doesn't want to admit to himself how wrong he was, that actually the earth is round and he has been fooling himself all this time. The materialist doesn't want to accept consciousness is the foundation of reality, and we all one giant hive mind. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Was this a belief or was this truth? You decide. So beliefs actually get determined by how you interact with your unconscious mind. And then from the sensory input, you kind of trigger them, right? You have a sensation and then you trigger a subconscious belief. And the moment it becomes from the subconscious to the conscious, you'll notice there's the sensory input, like the sensation, and there is the underlying reaction, and then there's the belief. And only by the observation and the awareness that you have as a human mind, as a human intellect, you can actually change that. You can actually interface with how you process reality. There's no other a demonstration to this than just political debates. Like, political debates are the best example of two parties being so obsessed about their identity with what they've related with, be it being pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, and then it's about being a good person or a bad person. And the moment you are certain that one side is the bad, try to now change your mind. Try to have an open open-minded about their position. No, if you change your beliefs to their beliefs, you're going to become a bad person. And you're not only going to become a bad person, everybody in your social group is going to reject you now. Have fun. So that's why it's so important to also be around people that are very open in their belief structure, because if not, you very quickly get trapped, and it also halts your own personal development. It's not just about political beliefs or whatever. It's really how you relate to life and yourself and your own happiness, and how fluid you can be, and just expressing your life in a way that feels authentic. A lot of it is about authenticity. So the same happens not just with political beliefs, but also with spiritual beliefs. Most people who call themselves spiritual people, what they're actually telling you is, I'm somebody who is deeply suppressing my emotional and bodily needs. That's the sad reality of it. Blatant hypocrisy, blatant belief structure, ideologues. It's in the spiritual community. If you go on the dark side of it, it's even worse than atheists. It's very extreme with how much, because it's one thing to have like a belief that the earth is flat, which already is like, okay, that's a very foundational aspect of reality. But if you think that you are like not human and you're like godlike consciousness, or that you are somehow every person in existence, it's one thing to be aware of these extreme truths as some direct recognition of reality, and it's another to use these truths as beliefs where you actually don't know if any of the spiritual mumbo jumbo is true. It might as well be hippie talk to you, but you like the idea of it. You like the idea that we all just one, and we're all loving God consciousness. And especially if you're suffering, right? I'm not like blaming you for it, right? If you're suffering and have struggled throughout your life, then somebody coming to you and telling you all you need is love and everything is love, and don't worry about all of the negative feelings you feel and the anger and the resentment, none of this matters. Well, of course you're going to say, yeah, sign me up. Sign me up, baby. Let me just be a God consciousness. Well, what then tends to happen is that you suppress way deeper than ever before. And going out of this construct it might feel kind of depressing at first or very anxiety inducing at first, but you will feel a lot of relief whenever you let go of beliefs. When you notice that you can actually hold beliefs lightly. And the way this works is because there's a difference between conscious conceptual understanding versus unconscious belief structures. For example, I know intellectually that spiders are mostly harmless, but then if I see it's a spider, I jump and I feel terror, just out of just some irrational fear. Not me, it's actually just an example. I love spiders. I have spiders all over me. But you can see that on one rational level, you know, right? You don't have any negative beliefs about spiders, like not intellectually, but then when they're there, you have this irrational fear. So you actually want to point this out then, right? You want to go to your internal mental model and then have an argument with yourself and notice the unconscious fear arising. And if you kind of want to brush it to the side, it's not going to work. You'll always have this fear. If you act as if the fear doesn't exist, whenever it's not there, well, then whenever there's a spider, it will trigger the sensory input, cause the prediction model of this is dangerous, and then you feel the fear. But if you are able to kind of circumvent this by, before seeing a spider, actually engaging with your fear of spiders, and then purposefully moving into this direction, it's likely that the next time you see a spider, you won't react the same way, because you change your relationship to it on an unconscious level, which is also how exposure therapy works. Exposure therapy works. If you purposefully move towards whatever scares you. And that's the difference about thinking about something as like a concept. I'm afraid of spiders, and to actually engage with the fear of spiders. Only the real engagement with reality, with truth, is going to change how you work. And then it's actually going to go into working memory. So the unconscious belief structures, they basically are below awareness, and they feel like this is just how reality is. And this is the automatic filter of perception, which shapes the reactions that you have before any conscious thought. And they get also embedded, like physically, emotionally in your body and the way you physically respond. And then you also have the like conscious, aware belief that you can interact with, right? You can speak it out and then you can actually intellectually engage with it, which is also hugely important. And you want to do this process from unconscious to conscious, and then you stop suppressing the internal belief. Yeah, that's about it. Do you believe what I'm saying? Do you not believe what I'm saying? Are you going to interact with it with your own mind, or have I just said a lot of horseshit? It's really for you to decide. But if you found any of what I just said helpful, then I'd really recommend you watch this video next.